Hello everyone, my name is Salvatore Di Costanzo. I am an attorney. I'm an elder law and estate planning attorney in Rye in Yorktown Heights, New York. And I'm happy to be able to present our weekly chat to you coming from my Yorktown office. We've been doing these on a weekly basis on different topics that are very informational and very useful to everyone that's listening. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback on these video conferences, if you would. And we want to start off once again by thanking all of our essential workers, everybody that's been out there on the front lines, helping our communities. We've made a lot of progress, it appears to be, in the media. We're well beyond the curve, and we all look forward to reopening and trying to return to some degree of normalcy in a short period of time. So once again, thank you to everybody that's been helping take care of the sick. Thank you to all of our workers in the hospitals. Thank you to all of our people in the supermarkets, everybody. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So today we're going to change it up just a little bit, and instead of me sitting here pontificating about some legal topic that we address on a regular basis, I thought I'd bring in one of our colleagues to talk about some of the things that are important from a home care perspective. We're getting a lot of questions these days regarding the options for home care purposes, and especially in light of the fact that, as you know, if you've been listening to my videos, the law has recently changed from a Medicaid perspective. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, and we'll re-educate you on that. But we're joined today by Denise Kuhbier, and I'm hoping that you can see her on this video conference. We're social distancing. We're more than 6 feet apart. And I think we're going to be able to do this very effectively. But Denise is the vice president of LEANONWE, which is a wonderful agency that we use on a regular basis to help us find suitable aids for home care purposes. So if you have a loved one that needs care at home, Denise is the person that we would call to try to put the right person in place to help meet the needs of your loved one. And Denise, why don't you tell us a little bit about LEANONWE so that way the audience can understand more fully.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me, and I'll reiterate what Sal said. Thank you to all the essential workers out there. I realize this is a very difficult time, so hopefully we'll all get through this together. So as Sal said, I'm the vice president of LEANONWE. I'm a nurse and been in the home care industry for over 30 years. And LEANONWE is a little different than anything you've probably ever experienced before. We're not an agency, and we're not hire on your own. We're like a hybrid of both. So LEANONWE is like a matchmaker. I would say that you'd come to us looking for a caregiver, and we find a caregiver that's a good match for your family. You tell us what you're looking for. You want a male, you want a female, you want someone who speaks a different language, you want a driver, you want someone that has more medical expertise, or you have 2 cats and 3 dogs in your house and a Hoyer lift, and you need someone that's going to be your caregiver. You come to us looking for that caregiver, and what LEANONWE does is we carefully vet caregivers that come to us. All of our caregivers are over 21, they're legal to work in this country, we check their references, we do an FBI fingerprint background check, and then we do a bio and a video so that you can go to our website, or we can share a link of a caregiver that meets your criteria. This way, you're not the one who's interviewing. This way, you know that we've done all the hard work, and you know that there's someone out there that has come in contact with these caregivers and approved them. We have, let's say, 1,500 caregivers that we've vetted. We've had about 10,000 caregivers come to us to sign up for our company, but we've vetted about 1,500 of them. And we cover all over the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. One of the most important or the best things about LEANONWE is that we provide backup. So if you hire a caregiver on your own, sometimes you find great caregivers, your neighbors, friends, mothers, you name it, has a great aide. And when you go off to work, that caregiver is at your house taking care of your mom. If that caregiver calls in sick, what are you going to do? Who's coming in place? Is that caregiver going to send a friend, or are you going to need to stay home from work? So I say that's one of the, the cons of hiring on your own. But here at LEANONWE, we have staff working 7 days a week. If your caregiver would call in sick, we are going to provide backup, and we'll send a new caregiver in place of the one. It's leanonwe.com, and I'm happy to help answer any questions that you may have.
So what we're going to do today, just to give you a little bit of a framework for this next half hour, we're going to talk, I want Denise to talk a little bit about different options that you may have for putting care in place at home. As an elder law attorney working with somebody like Denise, what we're concerned about, and what we will do as attorneys, is we'll put together a plan to hopefully qualify somebody for Medicaid. A lot of people don't realize that Medicaid pays for aides at home, and there's differences between the Medicaid home care program versus the nursing home Medicaid program. So what I'd like to do is I'd like for Denise to start off by talking about the differences between Medicare and Medicaid, because that's a big area of misconception. A lot of people think Medicare is Medicaid, and a lot of people think Medicaid is Medicare. They're two different systems, and they pay for different things. And then we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. I might ask Denise some questions, and ultimately I'm going to talk about some of the things that we can do as attorneys to work with somebody like Denise, work with LEANONWE, to put care in place, and also get Medicaid to pay for that care. So that way, when all is said and done, we've got a loved one at home that needs a certain level of care. We have proper aids in place to provide for that care, and we might have Medicaid paying for all or a portion of the care that's needed at home. So that way, we're preserving the resources. There might be a husband and wife. We're preserving the resources for the other spouse. We might be preserving resources for children, whatever the case may be. But Denise, we're always getting asked questions as to what does Medicare pay for? I thought that because I'm 65, I thought that I'm automatically going to get Medicaid, and they combine the Medicare rules with the Medicaid eligibility rules. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that. You know, what is Medicare in the context of home care, and what does it pay for, and parlay into the Medicaid field?
Okay, so that's a great question, because most of the time people get confused about the benefits of Medicare versus Medicaid. So let's just talk about Medicare first. Medicare is a program where most insurance companies, if you're over 65, you're typically eligible for Medicare. It's a federal benefit, and you could get care at home under the Medicare benefit. But in order to qualify for Medicare, you have to have a doctor's order, and you have to be homebound. Now, in the times of COVID, I would say that there's some changes that have occurred, but mostly Medicare requires you to be homebound, and you have to have a skilled need. And what that means is you either need a nurse, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, or a speech therapist to come to your house to provide some services. You can't be gallivanting around with your friends having lunch and then say you're homebound. So this is truly a program where you're providing services to homebound people. When this skilled service of a therapist or a nurse comes out to your house, you also may be eligible for some aid services. And the aid services are to help with activities of daily living, otherwise known as ADLs. So you should need some type of assistance, maybe dressing, bathing, washing your hair, getting in and out of the shower. These services are coupled with the skilled services of a therapist or a nurse. Once you max out your therapy services or your nurse is no longer needed, then your benefit is discontinued. So Medicare they call it short-term and intermittent care. Once this short-term care is needed, then both the physical therapist or the nurse and the aide must leave the house. Where people get really confused is they may still need the aide. They need the aide because they still need help in and out of the shower. They need the aide because they need help with laundry or light housekeeping. But Medicare does not pay for those services. And that's where people get tripped up, because now they have to pay out of their pocket.
So Denise, let's just pause there real
Yep.
quick, because I think it's really important for people to understand that Medicare is a short-term solution. Medicaid is the longer-term solution, but Medicare is short-term. Denise, for instance, let's say somebody had a stroke and they come home and they need some sort of care, at the rehabilitative care at the outset. Give us an idea of like how many hours a day would Medicare pay for, and how long would something like this last before we have to transition into a Medicaid program?
So that's a great question. So when a nurse comes in, they do a certification period that lasts 60 days. So they set goals, they set the number of times a therapist is going to come in or a nurse, and then they put an aide in there. Nowadays, the aide could be 1.5 to 2 hours, 3 or 4 times a week. And all of a sudden, after 60 days, if you even make it 60 days, those services have ended. And now you're paying privately or coming to see an elder care attorney about applying for Medicaid.
So before we transition into Medicaid, I think there are a few questions. So let's try to answer just a couple of questions, and then we'll transition to the Medicaid piece.
Okay, so the first one is there a minimum number of hours per week? What are the hourly rates?
If you're talking about private pay, it depends on the agency that you're using or LEANONWE. I mean, you're welcome to separately email me. I'll give you my email address at the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about hourly rates and number of hours. It depends on the location, and it depends on the type of care that's needed.
So one of the things about Denise, and one of the reasons why we work with Denise, is that she's a nurse, but her background is in nursing. So she's able to do an assessment of your loved one and really tell us with a certain degree of specificity just exactly how many hours this person might need in the form of care. And that's very helpful, as you'll see from a Medicaid planning perspective, because we don't want to get involved as elder law attorneys in a project that might result in a few hours of care, or we've had experiences in the past where we thought we were home care, going down the road of home care, and Medicaid turned around and said, this person needs nursing home care, right? And we also have instances where we work with people where, unfortunately, they're terminal. And sometimes the family doesn't see that so easily. And Denise might come in and say, it may not make sense to go through a Medicaid application process because in 6 months we're going to have to transition to a nursing home, or this person may pass in 6 months. And we just have to, work out a private pay plan for that period of time. So Denise's ability to do an assessment is instrumental. Let's have another question.
Okay, so your second question is there a ceiling for income to qualify for Medicaid?
Yeah, the answer is yes. But I'm jumping ahead of the game. I'm just going to answer the question. But for Medicaid eligibility purposes, there's an income threshold. But if you work with an elder law attorney, if your income exceeds that threshold, there's a certain type of trust that we can enroll the applicant in. And when we do that, we take the income over the threshold, we put it into the trust every month, and then you can spend that income on behalf of the applicant every month. So therefore, if you work with us on a Medicaid planning project, none of the income is going to be wasted. So you could pay real estate taxes, you could pay the utilities on the house, you could pay for sundries. A lot of our clients take a credit card out and they go to CVS, and all of that income could be spent on the applicant. Another question.
What changes are happening in October?
I'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Let's have Denise transition into the Medicaid
Do you
side
want-
of the equation.
Yeah. So Sal was mentioning Medicaid. There's obviously changes happening, and Sal will discuss that. But let's talk about Medicaid at home. One of the best things is that Medicaid will pay for aid services at home. There's some extra added benefits that come along with it, but the one that is very enticing to families is that the aid will be paid for. But it's a process, and you have to be approved for hours. The hours that Medicaid approves you for are based on the skills that not skills, the tasks that you need help with. So for instance, if you need help with bathing, dressing, locomotion, medication management, toileting, meal prep, shopping, light housekeeping, those are tasks that the Medicaid nurse does an evaluation to see what you need help in. Depends on the level of help that you need, depends on the score that the Medicaid nurse will get, and when you get a score, it'll equate to a certain number of hours. The more help you need, the more points you get, the more points you get, the more hours you need. But it's a very tricky system because it's really not here to provide a sitter or a cook or a cleaner. It's really there, the system, to provide assistance with ADLs. And if your mobility is bad, that helps, obviously, because you need help. It is not geared necessarily to people that just have memory impairment and don't have mobility issues. That's going to make for a longer conversation, but this is not just putting a babysitter in the house to have somebody keeping an eye on your family. This is really people that need, in and out of the shower, bathing, dressing, hair washing, feeding. So it's a system that's designed to provide the number of services that somebody really needs. And it's tricky. Things are changing and people are not getting approved for the same number of hours they used to in the past.
And it's become more complicated, right? The system has become more complicated. And because of the fiscal deficit, if you would, of New York State, what we're starting to see is that you really need to put together a team approach. Unfortunately, it's very difficult, and a lot of people don't really believe me when I say this, but it's become very difficult to go out there and just apply for Medicaid in a home care scenario on your own. There are a lot of different players involved. There are managed long-term care providers, there's the agency, there's the Department of Social Services, and it's really difficult to navigate this system if you're not accustomed to the system. And what we're finding is that it becomes a situation where they're trying to give you the least amount of hours as possible. If you don't work with somebody, if you don't work with an elder law attorney, if you don't work with somebody like Denise, if we don't have this team approach, we're not going to get the maximum amount of hours that we might be able to get. By working with an attorney and a social worker or a geriatric care manager or a nurse to work on the medical side of the equation, and we work on the legal side of the equation, when you put that all together, we've been very successful in maximizing the amount of hours. Sometimes we get 24-hour care. If you go around, out there in the community, you won't be hearing about 24-hour care on a regular basis. But if somebody needs 10 hours a day, Denise is able to identify that. We generally get the 10 hours a day. Maybe we'll get 8 hours, but we're usually in that ballpark. And so it's very important to work with a structured team. This is a really useful presentation that we're doing right now because so many people don't realize what it means to apply for Medicaid in a community-based context and why you need to work with an elder law attorney and what it looks like behind the scenes. A lot of people think that it's just as easy as filing an application. The very last thing that we do is prepare the application. There's a whole bunch of things that need to happen prior to the application that are so instrumental in making sure that it all works out correctly.
And I just want to add to that. So you really do get one shot at your first impression. So when that Medicaid nurse comes to the house to decide how many hours you're going to get approved for, you want the right language. You want to say the right things. You don't want to tell them too much. You don't want to tell them too little. You want the information at your fingertips so that you maximize the number of hours you get approved for. And it's hard to go back and change what you already did.
And you'll coach the families,
yeah.
Right? One of the funny examples that we have, it's not that funny, but it's kind of cute. If the person doing the assessment for the managed long-term care provider comes out and sees an individual who is, I'm okay, You know, I'm okay. I'm going to get better. I can go to the bathroom by myself. I don't need any help. How many times have you heard somebody say, I don't need any help? And then the caseworker says, okay, fine, you don't need any help. That's great. So what we do often is Denise will join you in the assessment and coach you in advance to say, listen, we know that you want to get well, and we know that you are very, that you've got a tough personality, but you shouldn't tell everybody that you don't need any help. So those are really important aspects. And that's a great example of why you need to work with professionals, because you don't know that. There's no way in the world you would know that unless we told you.
Yeah, we tell people, today you have to act like it's the worst day of the month. Your worst day of the month, when that nurse shows up, that's how you report. And that's how you get the most hours possible. So, you know, it's one of those things you were just talking about aides. So you got aides at the house, and they also get to, sometimes when the nurse comes out, say what's happening. And so you actually have to coach the aides too. Not only the family and the client, but you have to coach the aides. Do they walk to the bathroom by themselves? Yes, they just get up and walk. No, that's not the right answer. So I think it's
Now,
important.
we're not advocating fraud.
No.
We're not telling people to say anything that's not true. It's just that what I'm experiencing, or what I've experienced in my practice is that you want the applicant to tell the truth. What we see is often the applicant not telling the truth because they want people to think that they're doing great on their own, and the reality is they're not. So now, there's a lot of different options, Denise, for putting care in place at home. So before I start talking about, in general terms, the different techniques that we can implement from a legal perspective, a lot of people are asking questions. Can I take care of my loved one at home? Can I be the one that provides the care? Do I have to use an agency? And obviously the answer to that is no. You can take care of your loved one at home. You do not necessarily need to work with an agency. And that's becoming more and more popular. And that's part of the Medicaid program. And I'd like for you to just in general terms tell people what they can do from that perspective.
Right. So in New York, it's called the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And the consumer, that's you or your family member, can choose the personal assistant that comes into the house to help them. In fact, a family member can be the caregiver, but there are some rules actually. You can't be the power of attorney, interestingly enough, and be the caregiver. So there's some rules that go along with it, but you can hire a family member. You can hire your own aide. There's a little bit of criteria. If you hire an aide, they have to be legal to work in this country. If you hire an aide or a family member, they have to show that they're free of any diseases, and they have to do a physical with a PPD and all kinds of things that get submitted to the Fiscal Intermediary. What a Fiscal Intermediary is, it's a company that pays the family member or pays the aide. So for instance, people that have had aides for a few years, they could be LEANONWE aides or a private aide. When they transition them, they could transition them over to Medicaid with a little bit of criteria. They do not need to be licensed. They just need to be legal, and they need to go for some testing. Obviously, they're going to get paid directly with a W-2 from the Fiscal Intermediary. And I could share more information about CDPAP and how it works, but it's a great option. It's in New York. I don't believe it's in other states like it is here. But family members can be the caregiver. There does need, nowadays with the new rules changing, there needs to be, I think it's 3 caregivers that have to sign up. So it can't just be one person providing all the services. They need backup services. And there's more criteria with the new changes about ADLs.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's important to take away from what Denise just said is that you can have a family member, subject to some limitations, actually take care of your loved one. So it could be somebody that maybe somebody has lost their job during this COVID outbreak, right? That person might be the proper caregiver. From an accounting perspective, everybody knows that I'm an accountant as well as an attorney. You've got to make sure that you're paying the person at market wages, and taxes or employment taxes are being paid. You've got to go through the whole system of work of an employer-employee relationship, and that's actually where LEANONWE can be very useful.
Right. We work with a payroll company, so we can help if you hire an aide from LEANONWE. We work closely with home pay, and we can help you with the payroll with that. If you choose an agency, and they take out the taxes and they do the workers' comp. That is an option as well. But if you're making the transition from an agency to Medicaid, you want to make sure you choose an agency that is a Medicaid agency so that you can take your aide with you.
So in the remaining time that we have, I'd like to just talk about some of the things that we could do as attorneys. So somebody might come to us and say, you know, Mom's got a cognitive impairment. Often, Denise, we see, right, people with the initial stages of a cognitive impairment are still fairly functioning.
Yep.
You know, it's not until a few years down the road, and we tell people, if you've got the onset of a cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's, do your estate planning. Just because you've got a diagnosis of a cognitive impairment doesn't mean that you can't do your estate planning. You might still have the legal capacity, and I'm almost certain that you probably have the legal capacity to do your estate planning. And as that progresses, we might get the phone call from the family saying, Sal, you know, we think it's time to maybe put some aids in place because Mom is having a hard time performing her activities of daily living. She's having a hard time, you know, walking. She's having a hard time toileting, bathing, things like that. So we can work with you from a legal perspective to transfer assets, to move assets around. Prior to last month, there was no look-back period for home care purposes. Everybody hears about the look-back period, and people confuse it all the time. But up until about a month ago, the look-back period for nursing home care was 5 years, and there was no look-back period for home care. Now, there's going to be a 2.5-year look-back period for home care purposes. Still 5 years for nursing home, nothing's changing over there. But we're going to be working through a 2.5-year look-back period for home care purposes. And like our viewer asked before, the effective date is October 1st. So October 1st of this year, this new look-back period goes into effect. And what does that mean? Well, what we're counseling people to do at this point is if you've got somebody that needs home care or if you're on the fence, we really want to get moving on that now. We want to try to submit an application, get it approved before October 1st. So it's very important to try to address this now while we're still in a period of flux. Now, we're not sure 100%, we're waiting for guidance to come out if on October 5th, the Department of Social Services is going to look back 2.5 years. The way the law is written right now, we think that's the case. But we're not sure if there'll be some guidance that comes out that says something different. So the best thing that we can tell you right now is get it done now. Get the application worked on, submit it, let's get that person approved, and then perhaps once somebody is approved prior to October 1st, we're off the table, we're off the charts. Every year you need to recertify a Medicaid home care application. Could it come up on recertification, the look-back period? Yes, but we're not sure if it will, and this is some of the guidance that we'd like to see. So the only thing that we can tell you is act now. It's very important to act now and get this application filed because right now, as we speak, there's no look-back period, right? So we can move assets around. We don't know necessarily what's going to happen later on down the road, but as of right now, we can move assets. We might move those assets to a trust for various reasons. We might move the assets to a child. We might move them to a spouse. That's one thing that we can continue to do. There's no look-back period for transfers between spouses. That's very important. So there are all these planning techniques that we can implement as elder attorneys to ultimately get somebody on Medicaid home care. And like I said before, there are techniques that we can implement to preserve income. So we don't want to be in a situation where we have income and all of that income is being spent on caregivers when Medicaid gives us these opportunities to preserve and protect the income. And with all that being said, it's very important to have your estate planning documents in order. a good power of attorney is what we might need to be able to manage this application process and transfer assets. And this is why you want to have a power of attorney drafted by an elder law attorney with all the bells and whistles, with all the gift-giving modifications, so that way we're not restricted to be able to do this planning later on. This is an example. You've heard me lecture over and over again about a power of attorney that could be deficient, a power of attorney that should be modified by an elder law attorney. And this is an example of where if you don't have those modifications, if you don't have those gift-giving powers, we're going to be stuck. Denise and I and my associates, we won't be able to do the planning that we're discussing if you lost your capacity. We might have to go to court to do a guardianship proceeding, which is what we'd like to avoid. So with all that being said, I invite you to reach out to us if you feel that you have this need. I'd like to answer any remaining questions that we might have, if there are any. I'm not sure if there are any.
There were two. So many people have joined since. Isn't Medicaid alone is one question.
Medicaid is not alone. There could be an estate recovery when the person dies. So let's talk. We're at a half of an hour, but I'll go over a little bit because I think this is really important. One of the legal techniques that we'll implement, possibly, right? Every fact pattern is somewhat different, but let's say somebody owns a house. It's a single elderly individual at home. They're at their house, they own that house. That house is exempt for Medicaid application purposes. Medicaid doesn't count that house against you. You could have a house and nothing else, and you're eligible for Medicaid. But if we don't do anything with that house, Medicaid, when you die, Medicaid can come after the estate and recover everything that they paid on your behalf. That might be what you're talking about when you talk about a loan. So what do you do about that? By working with an elder law attorney, we'll set up a trust and put that house into a trust. We'll set up a revocable trust, most likely. A revocable trust avoids probate. Probate is where Medicaid can come in and take back what they've paid on your behalf. If we avoid probate, we don't owe Medicaid anything. Medicaid can only come after the probate estate. So when that house is sold by the kids after the parent's death, we don't need to worry about paying back Medicaid. That's an extremely important planning technique that we see it all the time. Misunderstood, not implemented. You know when it's not implemented? When you don't use an attorney. If you use a non-attorney to file a Medicaid application on your behalf, you got to make sure that person is working with an elder law attorney to refer these types of matters out. We work with other social workers, case managers that do Medicaid applications on a regular basis, but they're smart that they understand these legal concepts, and they'll call us and say, Sal, we have a house over here, what should we do? It's not a question of what should we do, they'll refer us to case, because otherwise they're practicing law without a license. And we'll get those types of referrals from these other individuals. So you've got to be mindful of the different types of planning techniques. If you're somebody that tries to do this on your own, apply for Medicaid on your own, you're not an attorney. You can't set up a trust. So you're going to be surprised, and this has happened a million times, and we've seen it, Denise. You think that you avoided spending legal fees and fees for somebody like Denise, and you did the Medicaid application on your own, which is quite difficult, but you did it, congratulations. And then when your mom or your dad passes and you go to sell the house, you get slapped with an estate recovery from Medicaid. And then I ask you, was it all worth it? So you really want to work with an elder law attorney. That was a really good question.
And the last one, why would they say you need a nursing home versus home care?
Well, that's for Denise.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, before she answers the question, one of the reasons why we work with somebody like Denise is because it happened in my practice.
So there's sometimes that the clients are at home and they really can't be maintained at home with the level of care that Medicaid is willing to offer. For instance, if someone is bedridden and needs what's called 2 12-hour shifts, Medicaid is not paying for 2 12-hour shifts. Or if someone is a brittle diabetic and they're on a sliding scale and they need insulin administered periodically throughout the day and a nurse oversight, they need nursing oversight. There's instances like this that they really do need a nurse and they need a team of people around them on a regular basis.
So with that being said, I really want to thank everybody for listening. I think we had a good crowd today. I want to thank Denise for joining us. We're going to continue these weekly video chats, and I'm going to continue to bring in other professionals in different areas because, you know, maybe you don't want to listen to me talk all the time. And I think it's very valuable to get this information out to everyone in different topics. So I'd like for you to share this with your friends, with your family, if you know, on Facebook, if you've got other resources. If you'd like to hear us lecture, we're always willing to lecture for particular groups or organizations. And if you want to reach out to my firm, my website is Plan Today for Tomorrow, all spelled out. The phone number is 914-925-1010. And Denise, why don't you share your information?
If you'd like to reach out to me, you could go to LEANONWE.com. You could fill in the information on the right-hand side, say that you want to talk to Denise, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Even if it's not a Lean On We question and you have questions about home care services, by all means, you're welcome to go fill out the information at the Lean On We site, and I'll get back to you.
And these videos are posted on my website along with prior videos. So if you really have nothing to do and you know, it's a Friday or a Saturday night, pour yourself a glass of wine and watch our videos until you fall asleep. So with that being said, stay well, stay safe, stay healthy. If there are any questions, reach out to us, and I look forward to speaking with you next week.
Thank you.